Hi, I'm Mark Yerpe, VP of Global Revenue at Intento, and I'm extremely pleased to welcome you all to Intento's webinar, Achieving the Ultimate Language Experience, New Standards, Approaches, and Technologies. We have invited language leaders known for providing great language experience to share stories about how they've succeeded in using technology, machine translation, and generative AI to enhance translation and enrich the overall language experience across departments and use cases. For those of you who don't know Intento well, we're an AI innovation partner to the global enterprise. Our enterprise language hub helps the world's leading companies successfully navigate the ever expanding machine translation and Gen AI landscape, enabling them to evaluate, onboard, augment, and maintain best fit machine translation and leverage Gen AI based language skills across multiple large language models, reusing and sharing their favorite prompts with their global teams. And just as significantly, we're educators and collaborators, striving to always provide fresh, valuable insight into the global business community. Intento's seventh annual State of Machine Translation report launched earlier this year, as did the Intento MT University, which already has thousands of users of our free courses on all things machine translation and is now being expanded to cover topics around generative AI and localization. As localization automation accelerates with MT and Gen AI, allowing us to translate unprecedented volumes at a speed and cost that was unheard of only a few years ago, we wanted to use today's forum to review how a core aspect of human communication, language experience, is affected. Where does MT and Gen AI add the most value to language experience? Where are they half-baked? And where are they leading us? Or better yet, and seemingly one of our industry's topics du jour, where are we leading the localization industry with their use? We're honored to have many of our customers and industry peers joining us from Procore, Coupa, ClickUp, and Wish, as well as expert localization and globalization consultants Pascal Tremblay and Alessandra Benazzi. They all have a wealth of experience, and we're so thankful that they're here to share their expertise with us today. Today's program starts with a keynote presentation by Konstantin Savinkov, Intento's co-founder and CEO, followed by our first panel discussion, Achieving Excellence in Language Experience, during which we'll discuss what it takes to create a consistent and authentic language experience beyond just typical translation workflows. This will be followed by a short session giving us an update on recent activity in the generative AI landscape. And lastly, our second panel, Automating Localization in 2023, will focus on how new generative AI technologies are being utilized to enhance language experience. Finally, just a bit of housekeeping. Attendees, please submit your questions during the various presentations, and they'll be answered at the end of each session. With that, we're ready to kick things off. Konstantin, please join me on stage. I'll just give a little introduction to Konstantin. Konstantin is the CEO and co-founder of Intento. He has a PhD in computer science and worked in academia and served a number of executive roles before co-founding Intento in 2016 at the Berkeley Skydeck Accelerator. A lot has happened since those early days at Berkeley, with Intento now approaching 100 employees around the globe, serving the world's largest companies, organizations, and governments. With that, Konstantin, the floor is yours for today's keynote presentation.
Thank you, Mark. I'll try to be informal. So, everyone, thank you for coming, and great thanks to our panelists. I know it's very hard to carve out Q4 time to prepare, put lots of effort. Thank you. So I'll spend a few minutes just setting the stage for today's discussions and talking about what we call language experience, why it matters, why it's worth discussing right now. So let me start with just customer experience. There are different frameworks to describe what it is. I will use one of them called flywheel model, originated I think by HubSpot, where potential customers, they learn about your business, they become prospects. Research information, became customers, then they starting to use your product, and if everything goes well, they promote the product, become references, expand usage, or they just continue using, just renew the contract. And every spin of this flywheel creates more value and more business, and the goal is to have this wheel spinning. And at every step of this customer journey, customer interacts with the business. It may start with SEO and advertising, continues to visiting website, blog, other materials, and in some cases, sales calls, trying the product, then purchase, which may include interaction with packaging, procurement, legal, then of course, working with the product, which often involves software user interface and transactional communication, then working with customer support and help center, and also in some cases interacting with other users on the platform. And each of these interactions involves one or another language, as for humans, we speak languages. I mean, today when machines speak languages, right? So it's more and more common. And we call basically this layer of experience related to the language, we call it language experience. And in more formal way, basically, we're talking about this multifaceted role of language in shaping and enhancing the customer journey. It's about every verbal and written interaction, from initial engagement to ongoing communication, providing this seamless, partially attuned, and emotionally resonant experience. In essence, it's the art and science of using the language effectively to connect, convey, and captivate. It's important to note, however, that it's not only about interactions between business and the customer. Each interaction propagates into the business processes built to support it, and also use language. It may be company language or the user language. And in the main language of the company, which is typically English, is the most complete, consistent, and authentic language experience a business may afford. I don't want to say it's all perfect, but it is perfect as it gets. Also because interactions with customers and employee interactions share the same language. But we know from research companies, CSA, NIMSI, Slater, to Big Four consulting, that you can get with a single language only so far. And even if people speak English, they prefer talking in their mother tongue. If anything, it also competitive advantage for the business, especially in markets crowded with US companies. So outside of the main language, it's where it gets interesting, and we're starting to talk localization. And we may look at those interactions as based on pre-translated content and real-time or on-demand interactions. So in the traditional way of doing things, localization takes care of the content in many languages using translators, while communication is handled typically by hiring people speaking in the customer's language, or bringing interpreters, which is a rare case because it's extremely expensive. So how many words a year we're talking? Well, we can look at numbers, for example, published recently at one of the conferences by IKEA. They're talking that across 40 languages, it's roughly 100 million words a year of content translated through localization workflows, and another 3 billion words of communications. So if you would count that in human labor prices, we'll end up somewhere beyond $1 billion, which is, of course, beyond any budget. So what happens if we rely solely on human translators? We have to prioritize, right? We introduce content types, we introduce priority languages, then we translate what we can fit into the budget and put the rest into the backlog. And with the real-time or on-demand content, there is a certain threshold required to hire people who speak this language and maintain a separate set of business processes around it. And it's all sort of sounds logical from the cost optimization perspective, and of course it's totally right, as that's what everyone does and it works to a certain extent. But now think for a moment about how it looks from the user perspective. Only part of their interactions with your business is about this priority threshold for the language. and others are backlog in the best case. And the customer experience flywheel will not be spinning that fast and smoothly. Maybe may not be a flat tire, but it's probably a spare tire. And of course, if a better solution costs $1 billion, we won't do that. But that's where we have translation automation with machine translation, Gen AI, and other cutting edge technologies changing this game. So the most important change that comes with automation is that suddenly, for more or less fixed investment, you can provide a baseline good enough language experience in almost every customer interaction. You might find a modern LSP that knows how to use post-editing to reduce costs and let you pre-translate more content. You can leverage MT integrations in TMS, help desk, or CRM to pre-translate content automatically. You can translate websites on demand or on the fly with one of the website translation solutions. You can use machine translation integrated with Microsoft Office, Google, Apple products to translate the communication, or you can use one of the providers who specialize in multilingual customer support. So you can support language experience for many audiences with these many isolated parts, but in some cases, you'll find that the quality is not good enough due to lack of customization. Other parts may remain uncovered, so there will be gaps. And finally, with each system silent around its own translation model, AI model, half of which hidden under the hood, not customizable, you may never get it consistent and authentic. So the dream I and my teammates have is to build a system where all language experience for a business is powered by a single set of language models, shared across all business systems through API integrations, and to build it in a way that both setup and change management for such system is not a nightmare. I would say we're halfway through, meaning that we have our language hub. For that, we have the whole system working for a handful of customers and around 50 others just starting to automate the language experience with 1 or 2 use cases. We still work in making it simpler, more affordable, faster. I hope some of today's talks will give us some inspiration to improve it. So why advanced, the last thing, why advanced machine translation, generative AI matter a lot now? So it's twofold. First, they enable much more cost saving for the existing LSP workloads. Part of it comes from making post-editing faster, but you all know that it's challenging to negotiate LSP rates. I can share some tips, but not on the public webinar. It's a dark art. So honestly, most of it comes from pushing the quality of automatic translation just above the threshold where you can go full out for important use cases. And that frees up budget for further technology investment. And then these 2023 technologies, which my co-founder Gregory will talk about between the panels, they enable automatic translation working at a good enough level for more use cases, closing those gaps between different steps of the customer journey and overall elevating the baseline quality. So based on multiple projects we ran last year, combining MT and generative AI, I won't go in detail. I don't have time, but we can talk separately. Also had some presentations about that, like SlaterCon probably is recorded. I would say that many things work, lots of good hope, but I would say that currently AI capabilities by far surpass the existing infrastructure. It's like getting an electric car and then your electric company telling you, sorry, we cannot really afford another charging station in your neighborhood. I just got that. And I think we'll see lots of refactoring in translation management systems, information systems in general, business processes, so that we can utilize the already existing AI capabilities not to 10%, but at least 80%. All of that will require lots of investment as in refactoring. And we want to highlight the importance of such changes. And we start with organizing these 2 amazing panels, one about language experience in general, and another one about the new technologies for automatic localization. Thank you. Thank you again for joining, and let's proceed.
Great. Thank you, Konstantin. Now we'll dive right into our first panel discussion. So we will be talking about achieving excellence in language experience. And joining me on stage, our panelists are Pascal Tremblay, Executive Consultant at PG Consulting Services, Paulina Macles, Localization Program Manager at ClickUp, and Jose Palomares, Director of Localization at Coupa. Konstantin, as the panel moderator, again, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I won't spend much time introducing the topic. I just did it at my talk. Basically, it's about that language experience, not just about translating content. It's about every business audience having consistent and authentic experience in their language. And let's discuss what it takes to create this consistent and authentic language experience beyond just translating files with language service providers. And let's just start simply by, I want to ask each of you to give a brief introduction of yourself and tell us, together with this introduction, about what language experience means for you. So, Jose, would you like to start?
And of course, the microphone will decide to stop working right now. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Intento, for organizing this. This is actually going to be a pretty good conversation. So I want to say, Konstantin, you have already said it all. So I'm not sure what I can add to that. You have already said what is like the great language experience. So about
Come
myself.
on, Jose, I'm newbie. I'm just near 6 years in the industry, just theorizing. Tell us what it really is.
So you just called me old. Thank you. I appreciate that. That went the perfect. So I'm Jose Palomares. I'm the Director of Localization at Coupa, which is a fintech software company. And I've been like many years in this industry. I've been a translator, I've been a consultant, I've been the CTO of Benga, an LSP that went to be part of Argos, and then I've been with Coupa for the last 5 years on the client side. So all this journey, I've always been like very connected to technology, but also like language and quality and what we call great translation and great language. So I have, I'm sure that we all have like a million descriptions for like what is like language experience. I think that you just said it. I like to characterize it as like, I think that at least language experience is anything that has to do with language and the people who speak it behind it, right? So it's not only the language, but everything else that makes an audience. But excellent language experience, I like to characterize it as an obstructive, as something as a means that doesn't get in the way of people being able to, on that flywheel that I learned from Natalie Kelly. It was great to see that mentioned. In that flywheel, it's an obstructive. It lets that spin, that wheel spin unobstructed. It lets people engage with your content. It lets people use your product so that you will be retained, and it attracts other people, right? So attracting people in an unobstructed by language, retaining people unobstructed by language, and in general, beyond all of that, empowering people to be successful with your products and your content in an unobstructed way. So that is the best definition I have. We use an example. I don't know if it's a good time to mention that, but we use an example when we did like a little bit of prep for this, where I said this is not the one characterization I try to stay away from is like excellent language experience is going to be excellent quality. And I use the example of like the boarding pass, right? The boarding pass. My full name is Jose Alberto Palomares Cuadra. No way ever is going to ever fit the name into my boarding pass. I know that many of you have like a much worse case of that, but every time that I look at my boarding pass, I feel like a little bit like push back and annoyed and sometimes just like really upset. But then when I look around and I picture that other people probably have it a lot worse and we all still get on our planes and then we go to the other side of the world and to an airport that we have never been before and we still get on our planes and we can still get to our destinations and our bags are not being lost, then that takes me back into maybe this is not so bad. Maybe this is an excellent language experience, even though it is a shitty, excuse my French there. It is a poor user experience in some ways. It is excellent from the point of view that it enables me to get to what I want and it enables all the people around me to go and do it. So I always try to not be too biased towards quality in defining excellence.
Yeah. I imagine you walk into a Starbucks with a full name.
Oh yeah, no. I think that everybody who goes to Starbucks all the time, they have like a made up name. Like I'm Big Joe. You go to Starbucks and you say I'm Big Joe, and then you always get your coffee with the right name. But don't try.
You know, my Finnish friends made it for me. They told me that Konstantin is just way too much, and it should be Kona for normal people.
Wow. I mean, in the US, that works.
Yeah, I use it sometimes. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, that's actually a good example where I was theoretizing too much because, if you make it very, very local for every audience, then it may actually be very, it may abstract experience for other audiences because they definitely have some shared content. That's a good example where, practice matters, experience matters. So let's continue. Wants to go next? Paulina?
I can go next. Yeah. Hi, my name is Paulina Makles. I am the localization program manager at ClickUp. We do productivity software in short. And ClickUp is very new in terms of localization journey. And what I found very effective and what I really think is a very good argument when speaking to people that don't have much to do with localization, what language experience is. And what it is for me, I like using the analogy of us being actually product people, but in other languages. We do the very same thing as product managers or software developers, only in a different language. So it's just as important for us as it is for them how our users perceive the product. But at the same time, I very much agree with Jose and what he said about unobstructed experience and levels of quality. It's very important to be able to decide what level of quality is required for specific language tiers or customer tiers, however you want to call them. But at the same time, I'm very well aware that it's very difficult for some companies to decide what those levels of quality might be. They might have issues deciding on which markets are important for them in the first place, let alone what levels of quality are important. And actually, I've noticed it's a very interesting discussion that's happening in a localization industry, somewhere between the sort of tiering the quality and hyper localization, where you localize everything for everyone. Is very important. It's very interesting how different companies differ in this approach. And I don't really know where that discrepancy is coming from, whether we just have different approaches towards that language experience, or we come from different schools of localization. But it's very interesting to observe.
Well, maybe it's also like, it's like water finding its way. Every large organization is very special, and it takes different way.
Yeah, might be the case. Yeah.
And I'm curious. You mentioned that you feel like you're product people about language. And I think it was very interesting at last Lockwood, Zach from Stripe shared that they put lots of attention to or talking to other teams, to also automating, interacting with different teams about localization, because sort of the language experience is a product of many teams working together. So do you like just take this product part related to the language, or you're somehow
That's a very interesting question. As I mentioned, it's a work in progress, honestly. ClickUp is a very quickly evolving company, and it also applies to localization. And internal communication is sort of it's difficult because localization isn't at the forefront, and I'm at the very end of the production cycle. So it's very difficult for me to get to the beginning, to the people who work on product design, but I'm trying. And this is what I think that 90% of a localization manager's work is talking to other people. This is what we do, basically. We try to educate, talk to, manage, convince other teams and other people.
Yeah, thank you. That's where like wheel models. None of the point of the wheel is the last point of the cycle. Each of them is a beginning, right?
Never-ending
Pascal.
cycle.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Pascal,
the curse to go. Yeah, the curse to go at the end. So yes to all the above. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Pascal Tremblay. I've been in the localization industry for a couple decades now. I'm doing my own thing with my consulting. So I'd like to say that I help teams develop or get to the next level with their language experience. Curating language capabilities, orchestration, and so on and so forth. And I love discussing language experience. And to me, I see language experience as a layer, and I see it as a layer that really enhances the connection between the user and the product or the services. Because to echo your words, Konstantin, you have the customer experience and you have so many components that build upon one another, and language is part of that. And in localization programs and such, when we look at localization, language experience, it's really a complex set of expectations, really. As a former head of localization for Gap Inc., we had very different type of customers. We had internal employees, we had external customers, and it was very important to understand what language was used for. So for me, when I thought and built the roadmap and the strategy, it was really about the purpose of language. So when I think in terms of my employee, how do I use language to communicate to them? And that would be helpful in terms of guiding the strategy. What kind of quality do I want to use, or what are the expectations? And then when I looked at our customers, what kind of quality again, and what is language and how it is used? Is it used in social media? Is it product description? So for me, the language experience is really that set of complex expectation that needs to be detangled and address the customer's need. But that is, one area or one environment. It was a B2C. But then I have to thank my friend Leanna for that, because we talked at length about the language experience and also the customer experience. And it really helped me formulate my idea. But if you have a B2B, what are the language expectations for your customers? Because your customer is the business that needs to be creating the language experience for their customers. So it's really about also building that foundation of language capabilities and really look at language as what's the purpose and really enabling that content through. And I really share that vision as well of that. Let the water flow. Like, what is the path of least resistance for the flow of language in different languages? And actually, when we look at how things are evolving with technology, it also includes English. How are we evolving that? So language experience is all the above, and also really be clear on the purpose of what we do and how we use language in our businesses.
Thank you. Well, interesting. So, Jose, Paulina, can you share how water found its path at your organizations? Where we go, building this foundation beyond just translating stuff?
A very interesting question. I'm still trying to figure out where that path leads. I'm still going with the flow, so to speak. I haven't figured out where it leads and what the path looks like. I'm still in the flow. But what I have already noticed is that it's to say that it's not a clear path is an understatement. But what I wanted to say is more that I needed to make more trade-offs that I wanted to in that path to figure out how to form how the water flows. And I think that it's a big chunk of our work as well in achieving that language experience, deciding where to put more, where to put less, both in terms of quality, in terms of money, in terms of resources, in terms of everything, really.
Yeah. Oh my God. There you go. Microphone again. So in my case, it's and for my organization, I think that we have already been through a lot of the journey of like trying to find where our priorities are. And I think that is what like every organization will do eventually when they reach the right maturity. And you treat it as one more business function. You need to look at what it is that the organization is trying to achieve. And then you need to be very bold about just say, if I only get this number of resources, if I only get this many people, if I only get this much money, this is realistically what the business can expect from us. If we really need to go and win in those X number of regions, the effort is going to look like that. And basically play with that. And that changes based on like the goals from the company. I am part of an organization that has like recently gone from being a publicly traded company to be a private company. And there's a lot of like change of scope, a lot of like change of focus during that process. So I cannot expect really that the overall strategy that I need to support is going to be the same. So I think that there is always this ongoing exercise. I don't think that it's set. I think the companies set their ways in hopefully a year, 2, 3, maybe ahead, but they're also reviewing it every single year. So it changes. And that is the case in my organization. Every year, there is a revisit of where do we need to go more boldly, more strongly, and what does that mean to actually not be obstructive and be conducive of winning business, retaining users, attracting users, and empowering users. So it's an exercise of like always evaluating. Hope that counts as a response to that. It changes also like overnight, right? It could be very different. And in some organizations you have other luxuries. So I'm also like in a B2B context where doing things like adding a new language to the products, it is a major decision. And if you're doing that, then probably your time is going to be taken away from somewhere else. So even that has an impact. It's not the same as like being in a smaller product where you just think more strategically, you throw things on the wall and see what sticks. In my case, it is you need to be very strategic about it. And the best thing that you can hope for is consistency. If you decide that you're going to win in these 3 regions, you need to have like a clear map of what it takes to win in that region. And that is why I say like boldly just ask and say, it doesn't matter if you like Japan a little better than France. Our strategy needs to be like pretty consistent in what stops do we pull to be successful here and successful there. And all of that, like business, I think I'm talking business, but that translates then into like what do you do with language, to what level you go with like certain areas of your business that need to be localized, how much you invest in getting perfect quality as opposed to fit for purpose quality, the good, all good enough quality, right? So it's an ongoing exercise where I think that there's no perfect answer for, that fits everyone.
Yeah. So strategy, evaluations, trade-offs. Looking at the picture in your background, this is the way, right?
This is the way. And if you don't articulate it like that, usually what happens is like people don't listen to you. So you need to be like Paulina mentioned, like you need to be ready to make those trade-offs, but also turn that into your language to the business. Otherwise, no one is paying attention.
Mm-hmm. I very much agree with Jose. I think he partially said what I wanted to convey, saying that I'm going with the flow. I simply operate in an environment that changes very quickly, which means that I'm constantly on the move, and my strategy changes every single day, just as the strategy of my company changes. And it's very important that these strategies don't go into paths, but they're one path. It's happening together in close cooperation. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If there's a disconnect between those two and they are separate, there's no way for success.
Yeah, I like to add that typically, I love to add it's important to bring clarity, and depending on your environment, you can also be the content owner or the content enabler. And if you, for example, in former programs, I was a content enabler. So then when you're clear on your role within the ecosystem, it becomes a lot easier to build your strategy and your thought process and roadmap. So as a content enabler, to your points, it's that the priorities of your business partners around language, about quality, becomes your priorities as well, so that you can build that parallel path for other languages other than English in most cases, and really expand on what they've built on their priorities and really create that language experience. However, I do believe it's about to change with all the new technologies that will enable us to create content in different ways. So it's going to be an interesting conversation to continue.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask. So actually, Jose and you, Pascal, you just added more dimensions to the complexity, right? Because there are also different kinds of users, and there's also internal users, so we have to choose between them and also between content and languages. So is there a way to not, I mean, in my theoretical view, which I just described, I think there should be a way not to choose what to enable, but to choose what to maybe enable better, where to elevate the quality. So do you see any first signs in your organizations where you can move to the situation that you can sort of enable across the board somehow automatically, and then focus the rest of the budget on where to improve the quality?
Absolutely. And it's about fine tuning, right? It's a constant fine tuning, and it really, if I go back to the program I created within Gap Inc., depending on the content type, everything was automated first, like all workflow, centralized function, all automated. However, depending on the content, there was a different level of number of steps in terms of the quality expected, and it's in terms of the vendor. So yes, I mean, it's already going there. Like if you have a content that is internal and it's only to get the data, the quality is a different conversation, or maybe there's not even a conversation about quality. But if it's customer facing, high touch point for the customer and for the brand perception, vision, and such. So all of that is already very important as a language experience to really fine tune where you have high touch point, low touch point, and how you orchestrate all that.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, before we continue, I wanted to mention, so if you have questions, please start asking them in the Q&A forum, so that we will have them once we finished. Sorry for this brief interruption. And so,
That's a good one.
Pauline, Jose, what do you think?
I'm in a very interesting conversation right now that potentially answers this question or gives a bit of context. I have a very dual relationship with my stakeholders. There's a part of my stakeholders believes in ultimate high quality, like it's always 100%. And there's another part that thinks that 80% is enough. And the funniest thing is that I don't connect with them. I mean, we sort of switch in how we perceive this. I'm in a conversation with our help center team that believes that the quality and the helpfulness of the articles should go hand in hand. 100% quality, 100% helpfulness. In my view, the ultimate goal of a help article is to help our users use the product and understand the product. The quality is secondary to that. So the helpfulness of the article is my primary concern. Its usability, so to speak. And there's a huge disconnect here between me and the team. And it's very difficult to solve it, quite honestly, because the amount of even if I wanted to go with what they want to do, which is a 100% ideal quality, we don't have money to do that. So we stand between, we go with 80% and we have our help center in other languages, or we don't do nothing. Nothing happens. There's no in between, really. I don't know how to solve this.
No, I think user decides, right? So, Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that I have a similar dream as you do, Constantine, of and I've been preaching that for the last couple of years. Is I think that we got to a point where I think that we've crossed the threshold of we should just try and localize everything, or translate, perhaps is a better word. Just translate everything and break the enablement barrier. And of course, we don't have the means for that. But by again being bold about the approach and just tell people it is better to have something than to have nothing, except in those cases where you fail miserably and you end up offending someone. But it's been so long since I've seen, for instance, like machine translation go so wrong, where we actually insulted someone or offended someone, or we had like a major epic fail. Those were like jokes from the past. It happens every now and then. You get like some uh, garbage out of it, and it doesn't make any sense. But we're not like breaking the business either. So we also get a lot of like English communication written by poor speakers or writers of English, some of them American, that we also struggle to understand. And it happens. It's just fine. We get over it. So I'm trying to like push for the same approach for everything. And it's been surprisingly successful. It is great to just tell people it's like we're gonna try to do as much as we have to make our customers and our users successful. Again, that is our main value, making people successful in whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. But you're a lot closer to the goal of being successful when you are in Turkey and you can like read the product and read the documentation, even if we machine translated the documentation. And it's easier to like talk to someone in, when you're like speaking Hindi or Tamil with a support agent that is like sitting in the UK who doesn't speak the language. Even if it gets a little bit like robotic communication between them through a chat agent, that is still a lot better than what they had before, which is like I need to struggle with my very limited use of language to talk to that same person so that person can be successful. And both parts we've been suffering, right? We've been suffering to not be able to like give them what they need, and they've been suffering having to consume products and content in ways that were like less from idea. So I like the conversation sometimes when we take it to like Africa, when we take it to like, the so-called developing countries where we, sometimes they're behind with technology, but they're also like so grateful for any effort of trying to like make things easier for them. And I think that we need that mindset across the board. And I think that people are starting to listen more because the technology now is better. So machine translation has been a big enabler. I think the generative AI is now helping with bringing even the conversation to, other aspects of it. Sometimes as a buzzword, sometimes as like a way to improve our own source English, but sometimes also just to enable people in a lot more cost-effective way than before. I think that that's my dream. My dream is that we do everything and then we pull back whenever we are like offending someone or breaking something big time. But we try to give everyone else. It's like when I get on the bus in San Francisco and I read some of the signs in Spanish, and I'm go like, oh God, who did that? I don't know. Someone did it because they did their best. If they could have sent it to like a translation company to get it done with perfect quality at 50 cents per word, they probably would have. But they had to like probably look around and say, who can do this? And someone said, oh, okay, I speak Spanish. And then they tried the best and someone reviewed it. And it's enough. I understand what it says, even if
Well, so
I
let's
don't
not
know.
put ideas into people's heads, please.
But that's not another funny one. It's like the biggest problem that I have at my organization here and before is people just not knowing any of that and instead going and doing Google Translate on their own or DeepL these days. We have like tons of people who are like asking to get their own private licenses of DeepL so that they can do translations without going through us. In the end, they're going to get worse results than what we could be doing with our house-trained engines, you know, and what they could do with our support. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more slowly, but we can work our way, right? You could have a portal where they can do the same thing and use your engine. But it's not giving them anything. That is like, they're still doing it. That is why there is like no wrong. People are getting translation done every single day when you're not watching. So the best you can do it is going to be better than what they have otherwise.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I would say, you know, having Google Translate Spanish or even Duolingo Spanish is way better than not having. And, you know, my personal language experience, I don't know, recent trauma was I was traveling to a conference in Leipzig from like an airport to hotel. And I decided to take Deutsche Bahn. And that translations they had the button on the interface, and I press English, and I press this button. And translations they had there were like 100% high quality. The problem was you got output of 4 different information systems. Apparently, they didn't have probably budget to translate all of it, so only one of them was translated. The rest was just in German. So I ended up like buying twice more expensive tickets because I just couldn't figure out which one should I take. And I couldn't learn that I need to validate those tickets because it was written only in German on the platform. And then a person on the train was assuming that I have read all of that. So having baseline is so way better than not having. And also I would say, it's so easy. We're all work at technology companies, well, at least Paulina, Jose. We know how hard it is to compete in those markets. And competing by providing local experience, it's just so much easier because so few companies do that in the right way, at least in some way. Look, I know we're approaching time.
Can I have a follow-up question for Jose? Because I just thought of a very interesting thing. How do you think we can measure, or when are we able to tell that we're messing something up in the market? We localize everything for everyone with quality, whatever we get. And how do we figure out that we messed up and that we should pull back? What metrics what would you be looking at to figure that out?
That's a great question. That's a great meaning tricky. So you need to have a pulse. So you need to have a pulse of the. No. It's a good question. It's you need to have a pulse of the region somehow. So in some cases, and for some organization, it might mean like having like a user group, or what I have and I've seen in some companies a user board, which is like a recurring formal group of people who are there to give you, you know, to kind of like stay in touch with your product and your content and tell you how it's doing. Then you have user groups made by your customers, but any savvy customers should be, again, brave enough to like go and ask for feedback and ask for opinion. So in our case, for instance, like the worst type of feedback would be a customer reaching out to our support because they see something that is actually impeding them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or because they find some piece of content that they really need and they don't have. So those are like clear indications that you need to do something. But when it comes to like quality and when you've done it wrong, usually the market will tell you. And if they don't, just reach out. That is something that I see. It gets lost as companies get bigger, but it needs to be done. There is a value management, there's an account management team that you can use to just reach out to customers and say, how are we doing on this? And if you have the data of like who is using what language or who is in what region, you can ask them the two magic questions. Where are we doing? How could we do better?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Thank you.
great answer, Jose. I'm sure it will make to quote, famous quotes. So look, we're at time. Maybe very quickly, if you can share, what's either the last, thing you did or something which you want to change or to add to your what you're doing, just for the inspiration of everyone.
There you go. What I'm asking the new year is that I get
right,
a lot
Santa.
more. Yeah, Santa or whatever
He's listening.
Whoever delivers good news for the new year for you.
Whoever. Right.
It's just I want to have more say in how we create English content, English being my source content. I want people to listen when I'm telling them I know generative AI much better than many. I know a lot of like the limitations, and I have so many ideas for your team, your department, and our source content that we get to work on for us to fix it. I could make your content so much better if you just let me. That is a seed.
Awesome.
That's something that we're trying to do. I think that is like the big revolution for many of us that we can affect now. We have a lot of new tools to improve English and therefore everything that comes after.
I didn't know I wanted that, but then I was thinking of source improvement, which is pretty similar, and using generative AI for improving the source, which is in some cases, especially for product content, is giving us a lot of headaches. But another thing that I'm really looking forward that I would really love to be able to use is automating post-editing to a certain extent with generative AI. So my language teams can focus on what they do best and not take care of simple, small issues that can be fixed by AI within seconds. They can focus on providing the language experience instead of fixing tags, right? This is what I would really love to see. I would really love to use.
And I have a generic wish for the industry is that as generative AI becomes more and more available through all tools, is that our business partners just don't assume that it's going to be perfect out of the box, that they have to engage with us in understanding language generation and language quality and language experience based on those tools.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry for going longer. I have only 5-6 minutes for questions, but let's go. So we have a question. The first question is about the keynote, and I'll answer it offline. So we have a question from Mika. How do you organize content types into different quality levels? Internal, external is clear, but what levels are within those broad categories? So if we can briefly answer.
So I touched upon that. So it really comes back to the point, are you a content owner in terms of languages, or are you a content enabler? So within the program, we were a content enabler. So for example, if we deployed e-learnings or HR documentation, the priorities and the expectation of HR teams were our priorities and our expectation in terms of translation and localization of the product. So you really need to align with the business and what their expectations are. And this is how we detangle or expanded the different type of quality expectation and the different type of content. Hope that helps.
Yeah, in my organization, we prepare a menu of all the things that we could be doing that we identified through the year, things where we think we could, like things that we've done, things that we need to maintain, and new things that we would like to do, align with people on the field to understand how important those are, and then just ask the question to what from this menu, ask the executive, from this menu, where do you think the top priorities are? And it used to be the 5 things that you would like to have, and then it became the 3 things that you think that we should be doing. And based on like the responses from many executives, just presenting that as the plan, saying the answer said the agreement seems to be that we need these pieces of that, and then just have like approval for that, and then budgeting for it, etc.
Thank you so much. So we have another question. Which is when we talk about that, something is better than nothing, and we admit that we provide not 100% quality. And question from Franco: do you think?
What do you mean we admit? We don't admit it. We proclaim that we don't need perfect quality everywhere. Sorry.
Okay, so the question is that when you provide translation just not 100% quality, how should it be communicated to the customer, to the audience, and how?
I'm torn. On the one hand, I would not be fast to let the audience know that this is a 100 raw MT. They're not idiots. They know. But on the other hand, I know that I'm unpleasantly surprised when I open a streaming service and I get a description of a movie and it doesn't make any freaking sense in Polish. It's just a bunch of random words. It makes me angry. And I wish I knew that it's that bad, right? So I'm sort of on the fence. I think it largely depends on how visible that content is. And how critical, both for the users and from the company, I think.
Yeah, I think here it also depends where you're deploying that content. I've seen a lot of chatbots is raw MT, or sometimes it's a little bit trained, but it's MT, and it's also going to depend on the sensitivity and the legal requirements of your company. So, for example, I've seen that customer support with raw MT will often have a disclaimer, this is MT, and it's very important because if MT spit out something that is not necessarily appropriate for the customer, it's important that they know it was raw MT. So I think here again, it really depends what the context, what's the content, and also the legal requirements from your company with the customer perception.
In my case, we do it just preemptively. So whenever we're giving people raw MT, we put a warning that says this content might have been machine translated, and we also use that as a call to action to actually ask them is like, tell us how is it working, which is response also like a question. How do we know if we're like messing up? Well, people usually don't take the time to give you feedback unless you're messing up big time. And then they appreciate having a way to tell you right away if they think that you're going to go and read that. But we don't take chances. Even for ad agents, is in every design that we do, there has to be something that we're like, if there is a chance that there is machine translation involved, we say that there might be. Machine translation might be used in this conversation, which is basically just telling them the truth. If we can, we're gonna link you to an agent that might speak your language. But otherwise, we'll try what we can to still enable you to talk to us.
Yeah, I think in general that's it's a great approach, and also what we see in the cases with, for example, the website translation, which sort of well understand is a risky thing. That if there is such notice, then actually a customer who prefers to read in their native language. If they see some ambiguity or something is not clear for them, they can just switch the language to English and double check, which at least in B2B, it works for most of the people. So it's helpful. Look, we're at time. We have some more questions, and I think you can just type in answers for them through this form. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for so many insights. We'll work hardly to extract them and share with the world. I really like this synergy which we got on this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We're going to move on to a mini session. We're going to do a session covering a brief update on the generative AI landscape, hosted by Intento's co-founder and chief technology officer, Grigory Sapunov. So Grigory is the co-founder and CTO of Intento. He has a PhD in AI and over 20 years of programming experience. On a personal note, though, I'm at the far, far opposite end of the technology expertise spectrum from Grigory. I find his style of conveying deep tech information to be both approachable and really engaging. I hope you guys feel the same. With that, Grigory, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'll give you a brief update of what happened during the last year in the Gen AI field, especially in the LLM field, in large language model, namely Gen AI applied to text data. And the year was really hot. I've chosen the title of this talk, ChatGPT 1 year anniversary. And just recently in November, it was a year since ChatGPT was announced, and everyone knows how the world has changed since then. So I took this beautiful picture from the recent paper with the same name about ChatGPT anniversary. It shows how many different models appeared during actually it's more than 1 year, but if you look at the middle of this image and see ChatGPT there and track what models is on the right from it, below the line, you see commercial models like Anthropic Cloud there, OpenAI GPT-4 and other models. And at the top, you see open source models. There are a lot of open source models, and open source revolution started since Meta published their first Llama model. And then the most useful for enterprises, Llama 2, because it has commercial license. And a lot of different models appeared as fine-tuned versions of Llama, and but Llama not the only one model that started this revolution. Yeah, so right now the field is very diverse. And here on this slide, we keep only commercial cloud models and commercial open source models. There are also non-commercial open source models. There are a lot of them. And there are some commercial cloud models that still don't available, like say XAI, training the Grok model, but you cannot use it right now. And some other companies train their own models. But still, even with available models, there are a lot of different models. There are many good commercial cloud models, and every week brings some news. So last week, Google announced their Gemini model. And by the way, tomorrow it will be available on Vertex API. At least some of these models will be available. In open source as well, there are news almost every day. Yesterday, Mistral AI announced their Mixtral model. It's the first open source model that is competitive to GPT 3.5. Again, great news. And right now you can deploy this model by yourself, by your engineering team, and run it internally or fine-tune. And who knows which model will appear, say, next week. I can't predict. The field is very, very lively and bright. So if you look at OpenAI family of models, again, a lot of changes here since the last webinar. And OpenAI, just before all these things with the board of directors in OpenAI, they had a great developers day and announced a lot of new things like GPT-4 Turbo and new APIs and new pricing and many, many other things. And if a year ago you had a basic completion API, you had edit API, you had insert API, right now many things are changed. Old APIs like edit APIs is deprecated, and other APIs like complete API or insert API are legacy. That means that they will not be developed in future. They are frozen right now, and the main API right now is chat API, and also OpenAI has a new assistance API. It's in beta right now, but all the new models will use this API, which assumes an agent interacts with the user, and there is a concept of system message and so on. And you have separate messages, and in assistance API you have threads that contain messages and so on and so on. So API is changed, and the new models will use new API. It's interesting. Again, Google Gemini, tomorrow, at least some models will be available, and it's interesting that it's a competitor to OpenAI models, and the largest Gemini models by Google evaluations looks good and really competitive, so waiting to try for it. An interesting thing is that Gemini is not just text-to-text model or vision to plus text model. It's more than that. On its input, it can consume text, images, video as a sequence of images, even audio. And on its output, it can generate both text and images. So it's interesting. It's a trend. We'll discuss it a bit later. And right now, there are a multitude of different features that's important for LLMs. There are many important features related to reproducibility. For example, you have temperature. It's a parameter almost every model has that determines the level of randomness or level of creativity, if you want, for these models. And some vendors add special seed parameter to have predictable output when you fix the random number generator. Every company heavily invested in safety of these models that usually determined by the training procedure, but the models are become safer and safer. It's harder to get harmful output from them, but still possible. Context size is important parameter. We'll talk about it later. Knowledge cutoff is a concept that means that the model was trained on some data that is limited by some date in the past. And all the new data is not available for the model, and the model cannot answer about questions related to something new that happened later than this cutoff date. Streaming support, fine-tuning capabilities, many other features. And it's interesting that LLMs now is more than just prompt completion. Many LLMs support what is called tools, like external tools like calculator, internet search, calendar, maybe something like this, or the more general concept of functions. You can describe some function that does something you want. It's your function, your developers prepare this function, and you describe to the model that the model can use this function, its function does something, its input parameters are this, and its output of this type, and then the model can decide when it should call this function. And then your special orchestration code can take output from the model when the model asks you to call this function. Your orchestration code call this function and return the result back to the model, and the model continues. So this way you can integrate the model with many different things, and it's a really interesting concept, and almost every major cloud AI vendor supports this type of functionality. Also, retrieval augmented generation is a very popular topic. I'll have a slide on it later. And the visual modality like GPT-4 Vision or Gemini, it's a new trend. Just to remind you how GPT-like models really work. You put some text into the model. The text is split by tokens. For different language, it means different things. For English, it's more or less like token is a word, but it depends. For other languages, say for Amharic or some very rare languages, it could be even one symbol takes several tokens. And you put these tokens to the model, and the model produces the next token. Then you add this recently generated token to its model input and resume the process. So this way you generate token one by one, and that's the output of the model. And the tokens you put into the model called prompt, and tokens the model generates, just output of the model. And here you see some numbers from 1 to 2048. These numbers are from GPT-3 model. It has context size limited by nearly 2,000 tokens. It cannot process more data than that. And that's the context window. And right now, that's an important parameter of different LLMs. Newer models of GPT has a larger context window. Say, for example, the best GPT 3.5 Turbo has 16K token window. GPT-4 previously had 8K token window, and there were special versions of GPT-4 called 32K. It has a larger window of 32K tokens. With the new GPT-4 Turbo, the number are higher. Right now, it supports 128K tokens. It's a really large context window. And I think one among the best competitors of OpenAI, Anthropic, with its Claude models, has even larger context window, up to 200,000 tokens. You really can put a very large text into this model and ask it about something. There is a very complicated pricing with LLMs. It's much more complicated than in T, because you count tokens instead of characters. You have different pricing for input and output tokens. Picture is really complicated. And to understand this pricing, you have to understand the basics of how these models work. What are tokens, what is context window, and so on. And with context window, the interesting thing is that large context is not enough. Here is a result of what is called needle in a haystack test. You take some large text, you put some small sentence effect somewhere inside this text, and then you ask model to retrieve this needle. And sometimes models fail on these tasks, and this is the image from GPT-4, and this is the image from Anthropic Claude, the last version. You see it fails a lot in different positions of this needle. So large context is not necessarily the best thing. It really depends on how model work with this context. But another interesting thing with this particular example is this one. Anthropic just published their research just by adding a special addition to the prompt. Namely, here is the most relevant sentence in the context, added to the end of the prompt, makes this picture really great. After this addition, Anthropic Claude finds almost everything. Its quality became close to 100%. That's beautiful. Just a single prompt, and the results are completely different. And I like this thing. During last month, I saw different examples of weird but useful prompts, and you probably heard about take a deep breath and work on this problem step by step. It's a prompt from Google model. After that, Google Palm 2 model became much better on answering questions. Another good examples is offering tip to the model, and suddenly model produce better results. And if you offer large tip, it produce even better results. That's funny. And another case is a case with emotional prompts. If you explain the model that it is important for you because of something, again, the results are better. That's funny. And you see that prompting is a pretty complicated technique, and a lot of fun here. Just to mention that there are many different ways of using the model. You can use zero-shot mode. You can use few-shot with some examples. You can fine-tune models. Most vendors provide supervised fine-tuning, but some vendors also starting to provide what is called RLHF fine-tuning. It's reinforcement learning from human feedback. With supervised fine-tuning, you just prepare a data set with text and fine-tune the model. But with RLHF, you take output from the model and prepare a comparison between different outputs of the same model. And with this data, you fine-tune model on these preferences. So prompting is not a complete story, not a full story. Besides prompting and even fine-tuning, there are other things that require external orchestration, like working with large documents, querying databases, applying style guides, using external tools, and many, many other things. That's important to know. Prompt engineering is not the only thing. Retrieval augmented generation assumes that you retrieve some relevant to the query documents from some database and add it to the prompt, and then the model produce better results. And this is the way to at least somehow avoid this knowledge cutoff thing. Vision modality is also interesting in new models like GPT-4 Vision or Gemini can use visual inputs on. And for example, this way you can implement something like OCR. That's interesting case. And finally, just to summarize, if you use LLMs, there are many different LLMs. You should evaluate different LLMs for your tasks with focus on quality and costs. But still, there are many, many other features that you might consider for using LLM. Context window, fine-tuning abilities, different response format, and support of different features and APIs. If you use open source models, license is a very important thing. Latency, knowledge cutoff, and so on and so on. So the landscape is very, very complex. It evolves, but it's really beautiful. It's beautiful to see such progress, and maybe we have some time for questions, so feel free to ask. If we have no time, I will answer offline and send it to you.
Yep, I think thanks so much, Grigory. I think we are out of time, but we will answer the questions that have been sent in offline. So thank you very much. And one point I took from that is it amazes me that Gen AI is going to be joining the heated discussion about tipping culture. So that'll be exciting, I'm sure. Thank you. That was great. We're now going to move on to our next panel discussion, automating localization in 2023. And for this panel, we're joined by Alessandra Benazzi, Principal Consultant of Global Sites Consulting, Saba Ghanem, Associate of Globalization Technology at Procore, and Brock Hansen, Globalization Program and Solutions Manager at Wish. Daria Sinitsia is the lead computational linguist at Intento, and she'll be moderating the panel. So Daria, with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. All right, hello everyone. It's so nice to see you here. Today, we will be reviewing Gen AI and other technologies that have made the greatest impact on language experience and more broadly on localization in this year. We will also talk about approaches and technologies that we're going to leave back in 2023 and what we're going to bring into 2024. And with that, let's begin. I'd like to start by asking each one of you to introduce yourself and tell us about what language experience means to you. And Brock, would you like to start first?
Yeah, I'm from Wish. I'm the Global Solutions Program and Solutions Manager. So I've been working with the technology behind the language and the linguistic work at Wish and e-commerce. For me, I think local language experience is about communication, which is about trust, especially in e-commerce. You need to get it right. If you can't read, you don't buy. So you need to be able to read and you need to be able to understand and have that communication and that trust. And I think language experience is really based off of trust.
Oh, absolutely. It's it's very true. If people cannot trust you, then they're not. It's just main principle of business. Saba, would you go second?
Yeah. Hi, I work at Procore. The official title is Associate of Globalization Technology, but my main work is as a TMS admin. Like I clean up strings, I manage users, And our TMS is a little finicky, so I problem solve a lot. So I think of myself as kind of a solutions architect in the making. The other thing I do is manage the localized versions and update the localized sites of our support site. And I often have to go into the localized sites and compare them side by side with the source to make sure that they're displaying correctly. And even though we localize it to several languages, even though I only speak like one of those languages, I can tell that the localized version is very similar to the source. So I know that that user is having a good experience because the sites just look so similar, which reminds me of a quote I once read, which goes like, translation is the process of changing everything so that nothing changes. And I think that quote was kind of like, just in a nutshell, what I feel like language experiences.
No, absolutely. And I've told you before, I will tell you again, I love this quote so much because this is something that I relate to as well. And when I started at Intento, this is something that I was trying to get into because I want every person to have the same experience when reading something that I do. So absolutely. And I also want to mention that you are a recent graduate of MIS in localization program. And considering that, can you tell us a little bit about what your school taught you about language experience too?
Yeah, so I haven't been in the industry that long, just about a year. And since I graduated last May, I did the Translation and Localization Management program at MIS in California. And I think what they tried to do is really balance the tech side of our industry and the project management side of our industry, because you need to have like an understanding or experience in both to enable any kind of localization progress at any company. And then the other thing that they made a big emphasis on is that they gave us many examples of very popular companies like Coca-Cola or Pokemon, not to throw them under the bus, but where they made egregious errors, but also simple with localization and translation in their advertisements, and what a big cost that had for them in like sales and things like that. So I think what they really instilled in us was that localization can go unseen, but the impact is usually very big.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a little bit jealous of you in this sense because when I was in university, they did not teach me that. They didn't teach me anything about localization, and then I had to go into field of localization and learn it the hard way. So thank you so much. All right, Alessandra, the floor is yours.
Hey everybody, my name is Alessandra. I run Global Sites Consulting. So we're a consulting company that provides globalization and localization strategy and operations consulting. We work with the expert in the loop approach. So we really bring in top-notch industry experts to support specific needs that clients have and ultimately really help them supercharge their global growth. My background is in international business, so I'm not a linguist by trade, but I've also always worked with international markets, so I really have been advocating for international users my entire career. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about language experience as the last person on this whole event, because it doesn't leave a lot of room for innovative thoughts. But really simply to me, LX is UX. So, language experience is user experience when it comes to I was going to say non-English speakers, but it really is the same for English, as Jose was pointing out earlier. And so really it means how users engage with a company and its products and services and content after it's been adapted. And I do like the analogy or the comparison that Paulina made with product. And I agree there, it's a hugely cross-functional. I think it's more UX than product because that's, international product, which is a little bit different. But I think what we should take from those disciplines and really make our own more, and we don't do this enough, is to use some of the methodologies from UX or product in our work. So we got to look at the users. So what are quality levels that we should have? Well, what do the users think? So really look data a whole lot more than we do, and not data on volumes and turnaround times or quality, but really look at data from our users, how they use our language products, and you know, where they may not be using them much, and so how we can improve them. You know, do A/B testing, which we don't do a lot of, like that. So really look at those disciplines and try to adopt some of the guidelines and best practices that they use. I think we can really gain a lot from that, and to improve language experience.
Oh, that's absolutely, because if a user cannot read the text that's localized, it's not localization anymore. It's it's not working out. And yeah, that's when I was a localization engineer, just began fresh out of university, and we had to collaborate with designers, who had to collaborate with software engineers and try to tell them that, you know, this is not going to work as a feature because we're not going to be able to localize it for people to actually use it. So, oh, absolutely. I relate to what you said 100%. Perfect. Thank you so much, Alessandra. The second second question I have is, how are new technologies, and I mean Gen AI or any other technologies that you've been using this year, have been utilized to enhance language experience in your specific daily work? And what of those approaches or technologies do you want to stop using because it hasn't proved really useful, or want to actually start using? And Saba, would you like to go first here?
Yeah, recently, while I'm updating our support sites, there's one locale with some strings that for some reason is getting stuck in MT. So what's happening is the tags and the placeholders are being displayed as text, which means I have to manually go in and, you know, erase them and fix them, which is a pain, but deadlines are deadlines, so we have to do it. And, you know, it could be like 500 words or 500 strings. You know, it's a lot of time. But recently, to solve for this, I used the Intento playground, and I just made a new rule, and I asked it to remove placeholders. And then so I just submit the like broken text, and then it cleans it up for me, and I put it back into the TMS, and just with a click of a button, reinsert the tags. So it's not completely automated, but it has reduced my manual work a lot. So I feel like, for me, what's really amazing about AI recently is its customizability. It's not so rigid, and you can use it for creative solutions.
Oh, absolutely. Because before it was so specific. You could only use it for this, and this purpose. And now, oh, it's so good. It's so manageable. It's so, I don't know, like a clay. That's what I feel like a good analogy for it. Thank you. Brock, what about you?
Well, first of all, to Seba's point, I think the placeholders, our localization specialist engineers, like they're our pain, right? Like, because you never know those variables, what they're going to be, the tags, like you've got to search it down. Is it plural? Is it not? All those fun pieces around localization and tags, we get them all the time too. So I think for us, one of the biggest things we're doing to improve our language experience is we're working on improving the source content. We have, 160 million titles of content, and a lot of these titles come in and they're big, long, gamified titles, or they're stringed on words, nouns, modifying nouns, and you really don't have any idea what you're purchasing. And so a year ago, we implemented and started working around cleaning up that source title. Like, how do you implement that through Gen AI and create a better title using this title, make it more clear, specific. We also have character limitations to go out into Facebook ads, different things like that. So leveraging not only the cleanup, but the character count constraints and giving it a very clear, defined piece has really made it so that the product shines a little bit better. So provide it more clear, more understandable for the user. So that's the first thing I think that we've been doing right now. So, and awesome. We're also generating micro collections and different pieces around content using Gen AI right now. And so it's creating a massive volume for us of content that is now being generated and created as you curate different categories of content and products into smaller, more scalable, user-driven experiences. We now need to localize that stuff. So leveraging Gen AI to provide a reciprocated version of that in a language is interesting, because you don't translate it because it's very creative, right? So you want to create a new version of that just in a localized version. So a lot of fun with Gen AI right now. So.
Oh, absolutely. We have a whole playground for it.
Right.
With this as well, absolutely. Do you have any additional scenarios where you have so much content? Do you send everything to a human, or do you use Gen AI to help with that as well?
So the volume of content is astronomical in the trillions of characters. And so identifying what content gets emptied, what gets human translated, what just recreated as generative AI is one of the key workflow factors we're dealing with right now. So it all depends on the content, right? Where is it the biggest bang for your buck? Where do we require the creative work to be localized and actual created by human translators versus can we generate this with AI and make it simple? Where's the cost value, the ROI comparison between the two? There's a lot that goes into that. And machine translation helps provide the backbone of most of that translation and that volume, right? So we want to make sure that we leverage the biggest, where does it make the biggest impact? That's where we use the most highest quality level.
Oh, absolutely. We've had several experiments where we've had to do a similar thing where we had to basically separate content that should be reviewed by a human and some content that is generally okay or good enough to not have to be reviewed, because we don't want people to do the same thing all over again, because they're humans. They can do premium work. They can do much better work than just reviewing the same content over and over again. So yeah, and I feel like Gen AI in this scenario is a much better help than some MTQ scores that we used before. Of course, we still use them. Of course, we cannot go without scores and metrics because they're more automated than Gen AI is. But still, when you can prompt any large language model to tell you, so look at this text, and here is kind of a scenario that you need to analyze this text for. What can you tell me about it? And I feel like this is such a big help for us and for the humans that we don't want to ask to do the same thing over and over again.
The more you can automate, the better. So if you take this massive volume we have and run it through Gen AI and say, tell me which strings are creative, then I leverage the automation to identify the strings that go to the right workflow. So that it helps immensely. And those are different pieces where you leveraging the different parts of Gen AI and trying new things is really fun, because tell me about the content, evaluate the MT work we did with Gen AI so that we can, get the score, the quality assessment score, like Intento has on their playground, their platform right now, the opportunity to go through and say, what is the quality of my MT? And you catch the top 80 and the bottom 50 and you make that better, right? And the rest is good enough, but it gives you that opportunity to segment the quality using Gen AI, and you don't have to have humans do a lot of that. So the more you can automate, the more you can, simplify work, because there's just so much volume. You can't humanly do it. I think Jose
absolutely.
talked about it in the billions, right? Like it's ridiculous, the volume.
And it's not possible, humanly possible, to have a human review it all. So here's one point where Gen AI legitimately is a very good help. We don't have 100% agreement with a human reviewer, but 85% that we've noticed in our tasks is so much better than we had before with MTQ metrics. So absolutely, I 100% agree. And Saba, what do you think regarding human QA? Do you think that in the future you would like to move away from it a little bit as well, or do you want to stick with it too?
So this is very interesting for me because it's kind of the first time I've heard these thoughts, because I don't personally oversee the QA process, but I do oversee the technology part of QA. Like I have to hook up our QA software to our TMS and things like that. So I have heard our team voice some frustrations about the amount of QA steps or review steps that we have: a first edit step, and then a second, and a review, and then also within the QA step we have like a rebuttal and so on. So I understand the need for it from that perspective, because I've heard the frustration of just how laborious and ongoing it is.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Alessandra, what do you think here as a consultant? Do you want to help? How do you want to help customers in this matter as well?
Yeah, well, in general, the role of the consultant here is, and been thinking about this, or was thinking about this, as these new technologies come along, like, where do I sit in all this? And the primary role of the consultant here in my mind is to really help clients understand these new technologies, because as Jose was saying, like, we know a lot about this stuff, and it's not necessarily general knowledge, right? We know about language, we know about content, we know about processes. So it's not only about helping them understand the technology and what it can do, but also the broad scope of applicability that it has. Like Brock already said a few things that actually I didn't think of, so I noted them down. Brock, thank you very much. But there's just or Gregory too. He had a whole list and a lot more that you can do. So there's applicability is huge with these technology. You can be really creative with them. So really, for me, helping clients understand the technologies, but most importantly, how to apply them. And then, of course, helping them then once identifying use cases, because that's the most important piece, really, is aligning the technology with the needs and the requirements of customers. So identifying the use cases that you can affect with this technology is basically the biggest value add that I can bring to a client. And then, of course, ultimately helping them implement a solution, whatever that is. And the approach there is to really bring in partners. So partners that, like Intento or others that can help with the implementation. So that's where I've been trying to position myself as a consultant. And in terms of use cases right now for clients, I have a generation use case primarily around informational content. So nothing too creative, right? So primarily product descriptions or job descriptions, things like that. So fairly easy in terms of, you feed the system something, it generates, an output, and then you have some human review. English for now. And then with other clients, we are looking at MTQE and automated post editing. I think that's huge, as to Brock's point. We do want to, automate wherever we can, and we want to really try to push premium services to the linguists, right? So we can use their best talent, their best expertise. And then looking at also source content cleanup and improvement. And, honestly, we can do that also with target content, right? Fluency and style, improvements of even the target content. So those are the broad use cases that I've been able to get my hands on so far. But I do love the evaluation of content type from NT, like spotting creative content, etc., to decide what to push forward besides just the PE, the quality evaluation. So thanks, Brock.
Perfect. And I really, really like your point about helping people navigate what to do with Gen AI, because that's something that we have been trying to do as well in the last year with all our Gen AI pilots, because it's a very interesting field, and most people in localization have just started to realize what Gen AI is. Mostly it's MT, glossaries, etc. And Gen AI is just this huge thing that people are not sure how to use, but they really want to use it. They really want to play around with it, and trying to help them, just here's your use case. Potentially Gen AI might be good for this and this, thing to do. So yeah, absolutely literally trying to help would be great.
It's interesting too, Daria, to that point, and to Alessandra's point, is internally in our business, right, in our world with our internal clients and stakeholders, they all want to use AI too. And the augmentation in content is crazy, because they're like, oh, look what we can do, generative AI, we can create this and this. They're having competitions. So there's different pieces where you're like, whoa, hold on, if you want this to go out, we have to have a solution to some of this content, or give me more money, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's fun. It's an interesting conversation internally to have around Gen AI and the use case because everybody does want to use it.
It's absolutely, that's what we've noticed so much in this last year, because people are still more interested in MT, of course, but some people come to us from different companies, and they immediately start telling us that, we've seen you guys use GPT-4, so what can you propose? We've on our side tried, some content creation. It was pretty fun. Can you do it in 5 languages? And we were like, we can try. we have not tested it yet. Just let us see, because we cannot promise anything, but we can test it. So
Right.
absolutely. And the last question for this panel is very, very simple. We're coming into 2024. This is the last panel of this webinar, the last panel of 2023. What new technologies and approaches are you most excited about for 2024? And Saba, would you like to start?
I think very much in tune with what the first panel was talking about the source. Because, for example, especially in school, we talked a lot about the fears and pitfalls of MT and how to manage stakeholders, like expectations of MT, because, we're all very weary about it. But then when I started working at Procore, I realized MT is great. It's doing really well. Our customers really like it. It's not the problem at all. And actually, I think the source that we feed into the MT could be more, like we say, localization friendly. And whenever I research this topic, there's scattered lists, like, in publications and just on sites about what localization friendly source content should look like. But there's not like a strict guideline or rule. So I would really like to see AI where I can feed it source content, and then maybe it can just flag like the parts that it's like will predictably get stuck while I try to machine translate it instead of me having to backpedal and fix it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because as you said, MT is great. It has its flaws, of course. We're not gonna not say it doesn't has its flaws, but if you just tweak a little bit the source content, just make it slightly more MT friendly. I like the word MT friendly because I feel like this is what source content is supposed to be. And machine translation gets so much better. We've tried it a couple of times for very, very simplistic cases, but it does work if you just make it slightly easier for MT to process. If you just let go of some very too human expressions, MT can do it. So absolutely, 100%.
And it's kind of like a nice in between stage, I think, before we like change the mindset of the people who are producing the source content, because that might take a longer time than just us flagging it with AI.
That's very true. Alessandra, what do you think? 2024.
2024 in what, 3 weeks? Crazy. 2 weeks. Yeah, so much is happening. So it's really hard to give a straight answer here. I guess in general, I'm just really curious to see how things evolve. I think, MT and Gen AI will more and more blur, boundaries will blur more and more. So I'm really interested to see how the two will continue to work together in different ways. Like we talked about these already, like you could go from English, source improvement into MT. So you get better MT, and then you get MTQE, and then automated post editing. Then you could even, look at the output and target, and then use LLMs to improve fluency, etc. Even, ideally at the beginning of the process too, the content that we feed through somehow, we can decide what should be MT, what should be, Gen AI, and figure out parameters around that, of course. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how those two methodologies will, kind of merge more and more. And I think the value out of that will be humongous for quality, for reach, for volume, for all of it. So that's really interesting. I would love to see, I haven't seen anything that even hints at a possible solution or even discussion of a solution like approaches to move away from segmentation, or we talk about it all the time, right? That segmentation is like locks us in, and we need freedom of context, but segmentation does a lot of great things too. So I'm not saying we should get rid of it completely, but it'd be great to find ways to like free us up from segmentation where needed, keep it where we can leverage it. And I hear a lot of conversations about it, a lot of complaints about segmentation, but I haven't heard anybody discuss how we solve it. So I would love to see that discussion, really in terms of solutions, not just, it's annoying and I can't do great reviews, or LLMs work better with more context and segmentation doesn't provide that. Like, we know that. How are we gonna figure this out?
Absolutely, because we've been talking about it as well, but mostly not in a way to solve it, but as you said, segmentation is so bad. It's messing everything up. We've been trying to work around it. We have translation portal where we can just throw the whole document in, and for some machine translation engines it works. For some it doesn't, though. Not all machine translation engines support whole huge context full document. We've also been thinking about maybe separating the document by not just segments, like sentences segment, but mostly by paragraphs or types of data in this particular content. It's hard. It's definitely something that
totally,
if we find a solution in 2024, would be awesome.
Or even some approaches, but I mean, of course, at the end, hybrid is the way. But it'd be nice to have some options.
Oh, absolutely. Brock, what about you? 2024, what do you think?
Oh, images, right? We have images for every product. I'd love, pictures, to Alessandra's point, is worth 1,000 words. You can, context around imaging, but having Gen AI, as they begin creating imaging for products, being able to create relevant imaging for the localized version of that product would be amazing. Like, we could actually drive videos or imaging to products for the locale, so it fits the, you want to be, from a consumer business or from a business side to the consumer, you really want to feel like you're part of the market, not that you're a foreign entity reaching into that market, right? So having the imaging appropriate for the locale you're selling to is really, would be really amazing. And we have a generic single, still frame image that works in this little area. We'd love to expand that to be able to swap the image depending on the geo and locale, and using LLMs. Gemini, that just came out, that we talked about this a week ago before they announced, right? And it's like, I know there's something coming, but what would, playing with some of that stuff would be amazing, right? Just having the opportunity to really put the content at a native experience that builds that trust and that communication level, that we do know who you are, we do know what you would like, and here's what you get. So be the wish list for 2024.
We're waiting to get our hands on Gemini so bad. 100% agree. Because we've had, I like this example to kind of sum up your idea about images from Konstantin's presentation on Lockworld, where he mentioned difference in localization for Apple advertisement for American audiences and Mexican audiences, where for American audiences, it's mostly about imagine how great your photos are going to be with our new iPhone. So you're going to be a professional photographer. While for Mexican audiences into Spanish, it's not going to be about photography. It's going to be about long-lasting battery to keep in touch with your loved ones. So absolutely, if you find a way to put that into images, oh my God, this is going to be such a great language experience and visual experience.
LLM for marketing, that would be great, right? Like, target the locale.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I just disappeared for a second. Perfect. Thank you so much. We have 5 minutes for Q&A, and I'm going to start with a question that's addressed to Brock or anyone on this latest panel. Brock mentioned trust when it comes to language experience, and I like this question. Any idea of how to measure trust? how is our focus on automation incorporate focus on trust from our users?
I think it's about for us, it's about a returning user, right? If they trusted you enough to make the initial purchase, they're going to come back. So it's how do you maintain and can keep your customers? If they communicate well, they trust the communications, then they're going to come back to you, right? And so I think that's the key metric. I think it would be your retention level. Like how well do you retain your customers that you currently have? Because then that endears that trust. But it's a hard metric to measure. It's a hard quantitative number to give.
Oh, that's very true. Alessandra, do you think trust can be measured in this way?
Yeah, a little bit. I think basically reiterating what Brock said. I mean, marketing has a lot of great metrics. They're the data, ultimately they're the data department really. So, life cycle metrics, customer life cycle metrics are usually the ones that talk about trust. In our case is always tricky because yes, we look at those metrics, but that experience and the engagement of the user is not only language, right? So if you have great language, but then your product doesn't offer like the right payment solution, then your metrics going to be terrible, regardless of how good your language is. So you're always kind of dependent on a lot of different factors when you're looking at these metrics, but at least they give you some information. And usually you will choose a collection of metrics so that you can then make some assumptions or assessments of what the trust level is with language purely. It's just really hard to detach language only from the whole product experience. With some clients, or when I worked as a full-time head of localization, we did survey customers on language. So that's one way, to get pure language metrics. So yeah.
I agree with you, Alessandra. I think it's actually the best way, and I might be referencing the wrong person, but I think Natalie Kelly said it, where localization is a factor of ROI, not a driver.
Right.
So there's so many pieces that come in, right? And so same thing with trust, to your point. Like there's a lot, if you can't get the right pricing model or you can't ship it in the right timeline, people then don't trust that experience. It has nothing to do with the language. They just don't like the fact it took them 6 weeks to get a product, right? So
right.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. One more pretty interesting question that we have is, has having the Gen AI reviews helped in tempering the expectations of internal human reviewers or customer expectations? What happens when the AI review gives a high score, but the customer is still not happy? And I think, Brock, it can be addressed to you as well.
Yeah, I think, and I'm assuming, Christopher, this is referring to the quality measurement of like MT content. I think that's where you get the top and the bottom, right? You can really see where the top quality is improved and where it's getting better and good. You can measure that really well with Gen AI. And then you see where the really bad stuff is. And so you can take the bottom and it'll elevate it, and the top you can make a little bit better. It's that middle bar I've seen where it's arbitrary, and a lot of it is, you're different. Your perspective is one, and then machines are different. And is it really wrong, or is it, situational based, context based, as Alessandra said earlier, like segment, like they didn't get enough information. There's a lot around that that you have to take into effect. Overall, it's been really helpful, though. It's an opportunity to really eliminate and automate a lot of the content type. But we always go with the human opinion. We love the AI, but if a human says it's bad, it's bad. Or if it says it's good, right? Like, thank you, AI, for your input, but I'll take my English opinion. So it ultimately resides on the human.
Slightly better. Yeah. Slightly better. Because when I started working with automated evaluations as well, we do trust in what GPT-4 provides us about, quality of language overall, but we still go to our internal resources and we ask them, so look at this English to German translation. What are you thinking? Just, you don't need to check all those thousands of segments, but just what are you thinking overall? So definitely. Perfect. Thank you. Saba, what do you think for localization professionals who feel they don't have a grasp on MT? Do they need to go deep into MT first, or maybe now that GenAI is so popular for MT as well, do they need to work on, understanding GenAI better too? Or can they do both at once? What do you think?
I would say dive into it immediately because I feel like if you're not using MT, you're already far behind the industry. But I think what's important to know is when not to use it. I think that's, from my experience, the biggest problems that come from MT is when you overuse it and you forget that there's like multiple workflows that you can use MT with. Like, for example, you can start with MT and then have a human review that MT. Like, you don't have to just publish that right away, or you can there's different workflows that you can do, or you can train your own like engine. So I would say dive into it as soon as you can, but just you really should be aware of the warnings, like when not to use it, when not to publish it, when you definitely should have human review, and the quality of MT that you're using, because there's different kinds.
Understanding MT first, definitely, I agree. And trying to understand where to use it. That's a very good point, because creative content, we always get stuck with creative content. You guys probably do too, because MT is generally wonderful when it comes to website translations, user guides, or some parts of internal communication. When it comes to creative content, be careful. But here, though, GenAI might come into help. So perfect. Thank you, Saba. And I think we're just slightly over our limits. So we're going to answer all the rest of the questions by typing them. So thank you so much for this panel, guys. It was wonderful talking to you, Mark.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, panelists. That was a great panel to wrap things up. And wow, what a webinar. That was great. It was a real language experience in and of itself, I guess. We packed a lot of learning into 2 hours, and we shared a lot of ideas. I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you for joining us. I want to take a moment to say thank you specifically to the panelists. So if you guys could join me back on stage for a moment. One of the things I love most about the localization community is how much time and effort we all spend sharing information and knowledge to move the industry forward, to shape multilingual communication, cross-border trade, global accessibility and inclusion, and in this case, to promote excellence in language experience. It's a terrific community to be part of, and you guys are really what make it so special. So thank you so much for your time, and we can't wait to do it again. To the audience, thank you for joining us. For those of you that joined late, we'll make a full recording available, and we hope you came away with some useful ideas and insights. We're always happy to set individual discussions with you about all things MT and Gen AI, and to explore applying the techniques and tools discussed today towards your own use cases of highest interest. So we'd love to hear from you. With that, thank you again for joining us, and have a terrific day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.